Good evening. Welcome to tonight's meeting. Welcome to City Hall. It's good to see a good crowd in this evening for our meeting. I'd just like to start the meeting, first of all, just acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we're meeting tonight, and that's the Wadawurrung people, part of the Kulin Nation. Just pay my respects to their elders, past and present. Just a quick statement to read out because we are on live streaming tonight, and so this meeting is being broadcast on the internet, and the recording of the meeting will be published on Council's website. As a visitor in the public gallery, you may be filmed. By remaining in the public gallery, you consent to being filmed and for the recording of you to be made publicly available by the Council. A copy of the Council's live streaming and recording Council meetings policy is available at the back of the room and on the Council's website. Please speak with one of our staff members if you have any questions in relation to this. Okay, any apologies for this evening's meeting? None noted. Confirmation of the minutes, please, of the meeting held on the 26th of February 2019. Moved Councillor Sullivan, seconded Councillor Asher. Those in favour, those against, they are carried. Thank you. Any declarations of conflicts of interest? None noted. If any arise, please just let us know. Question time is an opportunity for members of the gallery to ask a question of Council. We start with questions that have been forwarded in during the week. And our first question this evening is from Mr. Dennis O'Brien. Is Dennis with us this evening? Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two questions. Is it one after the other? Or?
I can ask the first one and I'll do my best to give you a response.
Okay, top. Bellarine Peninsula Localised Planning Statement said in September 2015, St Leonards is a small coastal settlement with both holiday homes and permanent residents and a focus on fishing and camping. It is not a designated growth location. Nevertheless, during the past decade or so, COG has almost doubled residential development on St Leonards. When is COG going to realise that its imposed growth without method of funding to matching infrastructure is irresponsible? And when will COG catch up this sudden COG-caused growth with infrastructure? We have little parking in the shopping centre, inadequate footpaths, primitive curbing, no kindergarten, no maternal or welfare centre, no land for the growth of the primary school, to name a few.
Well, the response I'll be giving is all townships, excuse me, all townships must take a share of the growing population that is coming to our region, and this is placing strains on infrastructure. St Leonards is not a designated growth area, and the development underway is within the settlement boundary for the township. The estates that are being developed are providing substantial funding for an early learning and community centre that will provide services to all existing and future residents of St Leonards. Council recently adopted the Greater Geelong Settlement Strategy. Our planning policy for St Leonards is that there will be no further outward growth and all new developments must be within the settlement boundary. The state government have committed to declaring the Bellarine Peninsula as a distinctive landscape. This planning legislation will set permanent settlement boundaries for the township on the Bellarine. So what we're saying is the current boundary is set and is remaining, and there is funding being forwarded from developers that will result in infrastructure being built. Do you have a second question, sir? Okay. Thank you.
On 10th of July 2018, Council has voted to proceed with a land exchange at Indented Head. On 11th of July, the COG press release said Myra Ira Proprietary Limited, developers of the Seabreeze estate, will part with the land in return for a vacant council-owned reserve at 690 Batman Road. However, on the 10th of July 2018, the minutes record a briefing note to councillors which said a planning permit action requirement was to vest the land to be sold by council in the council's name. Site construction has now started on the vacant council-owned reserve. What date was the reserve vested in council's name and by which government department? What was the date of sale of the council's land? What is the current ownership of the reserve and what is the current ownership of the developer's land to be exchanged? When was the developer's payment of 110,000 received, and why were councillors not briefed that the vacant council-owned reserve was already held entitled by Myra Ira since 1988, which I'm holding in my hand.
Okay, thank you. I may have to take some of the questions on notice, but we will get responses to them. But my response, as I have, is the land which council agreed to swap with Myra Ira Nominees Proprietary Limited vested in council in 1988, and the land swap will be completed in accordance with the resolution of council on the 10th of July 2018. Now, I know that doesn't answer all the questions that you've presented here, but I'll take those on notice and get written responses to you to answer the questions that you've got in relation to some of the funding, etc. So I'll make sure answers are given to those.
Allowed to comment, am I? Or ask a question?
Well, if you wish to make comment, I'll actually be attending the St Leonard's meeting tomorrow, so we can have a discussion further then if you wish.
Okay. I just hoped that a day and a half would have been enough to find those answers out. That's all I'll say at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. James Collins. Is James here this evening? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I only have one question. The Local Government Bill of 2018 was introduced into the Victorian Parliament on the 23rd of May 2018. Subsequently, all parliamentary proceedings came to an end in the lead up to the state election. Thus, the Local Government Act of 1989 remains in operation. Does the Council have any information on whether the new bill will be resubmitted in the current form or will be subject to review before resubmission? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. At this point in time, we don't know. We don't know if the bill has been resubmitted or if it, as it is, or changed. So we have no information at this point in time. So I guess we wait to hear back from the state government at this point.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, ask him.
I'm not going to put Mr Medic on the spot with that question. Thank you. I don't think that would be fair.
All's fair in love and war.
Well, this is not love and war. Rusty. Is Rusty with us this evening? If not, I'll take Rusty's question on notice. Mr Steve Ager. Is Steve here this evening? We'll take Steve's question on notice. And Lex Chalmers. Is Lex with us this evening? No, we'll take Lex's question on notice as well. Thank you. Normally, yeah. Not this evening. An opportunity for members of the gallery to come forward and ask a question of council. So if anyone has a question, please let us know. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr Mayor and councillors. My name's Jackie Edge and I'm here representing Elizabeth Street community to ask a question or two about the safety and amenity of that area in Geelong West. In recent discussions with council, a number of funding sources such as big roads were identified that could contribute to the remediation works that we've discussed. And some of those sources had a response deadline, and it was noted that it was around March 2019. So I'd like confirmation from council whether contact has been made with, or an application has been made and forwarded to those potential funding sources. My second question is around the allocation of the FY20 budget, and will there be any allocation to address the safety and amenity needs of Elizabeth Street and the surrounding the surrounding streets? And my final question is around the tree planting. And when is Elizabeth Street and the surrounding streets in Geelong West scheduled for tree planting in accordance with our urban tree policy? At the moment, there are absolutely no trees, and I think that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. I'm not too sure in relation to question one. You're talking about a funding source in relation to safety and amenity around Elizabeth Street?
Yes.
Elizabeth Street in general, or a particular part of Elizabeth Street?
Elizabeth Street in general.
Okay, which extends from Church Street down to Autumn Street.
Indeed.
Yep. Okay. I'm not too sure if I'm able to get a response from our City Services Director, but thank you, Guy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for your question. The response is actually with me, and I was actually working through the responses with officers today.
Right, thank you.
So you should get a response tomorrow. At this point in time, there isn't an identified traffic management solution to put forward a funding application. The initial analysis of traffic speed and volume data suggests that it's relatively similar to other types of streets, so it doesn't rank as a high priority in terms of intervention and projects that might actually get funding from Vic Roads, from Black Spot funding and other sources. We are looking at our planting program to see what we can do in terms of treescaping, and I think there was a third issue in terms of a request for underground power lines. Again, that's a fairly expensive project, and many other streets would like to have the same. So, I won't give you any false hopes about probability of getting funding for undergrounding power lines. But the positive thing is, I think we can certainly do something in terms of the treescaping.
Okay.
So, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else with a question from the gallery?
Mr Mayor, just in regards to the last person that asked the question, I'm sorry, your name fails me.
Jackie Edge.
If you'd like to maybe just send a quick email to the Brownville Ward councillors, our names are on the website, and we'd be happy to at least take on board your concerns and maybe even go out and meet with you at some stage.
Okay, thank you. If there's no further questions from the gallery, we'll move... I was going to say, we can't get off that easy.
I'll try not to.
Okay, thank you.
I'm from St Leonard's Progress Group down there.
What's your name?
Bob Kengeeser.
Thanks, Bob.
From St Leonard's. The question I'd like to ask is the existing golf club, part of it, the Old Forest, has that been approved to be demolished for future housing estates in Abbottson Road?
I'm aware of Royal St Leonard's, but I'm not too sure about. I'm not too sure about any proposed development. Gareth, have you? No, City of, Director of Planning.
Take it on notice to investigate it.
Yeah. We don't know. We're not aware of anything, obviously, that's current.
Yeah, well, what it is, at the moment, we're all getting covered in dust down there from the Sea Change 2 estate, which, has mucked up my solar system on the roof, cleaning out the evap coolers. There's a lot of people who are upset about that, and today I've spent the day vacuuming out the house, like a lot of others. Maybe the council in future permit, when they're subdividing, do the subdividing in stages. Like I did ring up one day there in Levian's Road and spoke to one of your members in the staff. You're digging up and you've got coming down Levian's Road, you've got the sewer and the water going up the road already into the new estate, and I said to the blokes, and I rang up the planning department, why don't you put 2 T's off it and run it into the football ground over the road and just leave IOs there for future stadium or, whatever you're going to put over there, toilet block at least, which is frequently used, just go behind the bush. That's the answer I got from your departments. It's not in this planning And I said, I know it's not in this planning, but why aren't you looking ahead? There doesn't seem to be anyone looking ahead. And when you ask others that could have some say and input in it, the same result. But just you're throwing around like a tennis ball on a tennis racket.
Yeah.
The other one is down on the beachfront, on the caravan park, the drainage that comes out of the overflow of the lake. People have complained of the mosquitoes. This is campers on the foreshore. Bayside say that lake outlet from the bridge, from the road, Bluff Road, out should be in a concrete culvert and graded out from the high level of the culvert at the bottom of the base of the bridge out to the high level of the water level so that it'll run out, but make it the width of a U-shaped culvert so that the bobcat can go up there and just drag it out. Instead, it's all fouled up with muck and everything else. And recently, over the weekend, we've had a clean up there. The whole state school, our public state school, which is undersized because we're taking 14 or something people over to Ocean Grove and Port Queenscliff, also to Port Arlington, because we haven't got the facilities. There doesn't seem to be any facilities going into the town, and this is what we're getting at with some of the planning. There's a lack of planning either from you people or from the state government because no one's talking to one another. We, the people down there, we've got 7 coffee shops. They work pretty hard in the summertime. During the winter, it's quiet, it's dead. Couldn't we get a commission that on the off-season, that instead of charging $4 a table or something on the footpath, couldn't they be that reimbursed out of their allowances and their rates? Make a cheaper rate for off-season. I could go on and on and on, but then if you go down to Port Arlington, coming up 2 blocks from Port Arlington, this is another question for the Port Arlington mob. A recent meeting I went to with your politician, Liberal, there was 30 to 40 people attended that meeting at the hall on the park down at Port Arlington. The vote was we want a swimming pool, a heated swimming pool for the people in the area. Now, everyone, when you say something, the council don't allow for that. That's someone else's responsibility. The government just say, well, we can't help it. What's going on? There's another one. You know, it goes on and on and on. And then one more question. Stage 2 has been designed coming over the hill from in between Levians Road and down to Bluff Road. It's going to be subdivided, which has already been sold off. Why can't the council, instead of sort of designating an area as a park, say, look, we want 1.25 acres as a park for the time being in that estate that you're going to approve, that's for sure, because it's good money to you. Why can't you allot it that it could be made an aged care home, which eventually a lot of people down there, because the majority of us are over 65, which I'm 75, why can't you allow that to be built later on at some stage as an aged care home, which you're looking straight through to Queenscliff and we'll all die happy? The end of the question.
Your comments and questions are quite valid, Bob. As I say, I'll be
ramble on. I can't be with you tomorrow, so.
Well, no, I'm sure others will speak in a similar manner, which I'm fine with that. Look, a couple of things quickly in relation to dust that comes off development sites. Developers have a responsibility to make sure that dust is mitigated and does stay on site. Whether they do that through water treatments or similar, they have a responsibility to make sure that dust does not go into neighbouring properties. So we'll make some inquiries with the developers.
They've tried to water can it, but I don't know how they work their water rates, because a water truck in the summertime, he was going flat out from any hydrant he could say, and then when you ring up Barwon Water, they say, oh, it's all been allowed for.
No,
anyway.
We appreciate your comments, though.
Merry Christmas.
A bit early, but we'll take it. Excellent. Thank you. Any other questions this evening? If not, we'll go into Section B reports. Thank you. Petitions. Any petitions to be presented this evening? None? Thank you. Section B reports. Our first report is the Northern and Western Growth Area and the adoption of the framework plan. Moved Councillor Mason. Oh, sorry, my apologies. Moved Councillor Aitken, sorry, and seconded Councillor Mason. Thank you, Councillor Aitken.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. This is actually the most important decision that a Geelong council will make for the next 30 years. And what we're actually doing tonight is we're moving the residential and growth boundaries of Geelong away from its southern area, associated with Armstrong Creek, and the east with Bellarine Peninsula. And where we're moving them is to the north and west of Geelong. What we actually are agreeing to tonight is to establish 2 new residential growth zones for Geelong. And in fact, we're actually agreeing to establish a new city the size of Ballarat. The total population is expected to be about 112,000, which in fact is actually what Ballarat just sits under now at this particular point of time. So the significance of it in those poor numbers sense needs to be understood by the greater community of Geelong. The northern growth zone is expected to have a population of around about 65,000, so it will be about the size of Shepparton. The western growth zone will be about 65,000, be about the size of Shepparton. The northern growth zone will have a population of around about 48 to 50,000 people, and that would be the equivalent of double the size of Warrnambool. 2 of the major aspects that the community will notice in the future of this particular development, one is the establishment of Lake Moorabool. And Lake Moorabool is actually the filling of what is currently the quarry at Barrabool. And that lake will actually have a 5-kilometre radius and actually be, I understand, the largest piece of inland fresh water that's actually been established in Victoria for over 60 to 70 years. And the significance of that piece of infrastructure in Geelong will be unheard of in terms of what we can achieve in terms of the beautification and creating a new physical environment for the Geelong community with the establishment of this lake, which I understand will take up to 7 years to be able to fill because of the amount of water that actually goes into it. And it will have a capacity of about, I think, 45 billion freshwater litres in that lake. The second aspect of significance from the decision tonight is actually the township of Lara will no longer be standalone. What the northern growth zone will actually link the Lara community for the first time ever with urbanised Geelong. So with the establishment of Lara West that's occurring now and the decision tonight to establish the northern growth zone, it means that Lara will no longer be a township by itself. Now some people may regret that, but others may see as a great opportunity for the future for urbanised Geelong and also urbanised Lara. Let me talk a little bit more about the project numbers. There's proposed to be 19 primary schools in this growth zone. There are proposed to be 5 secondary schools in this growth zone. So when you look at those numbers by themselves, you understand the significance of actually what is being put forward tonight by the council. I'm very pleased that our officers have listened to input from councillors in this project, and some of the areas that I had a personal interest in, and I'm pleased to see that they have been included in this proposal, is that the city is trying to find how those existing areas in the community can benefit economically from the decision that's made tonight. And one way we are doing that as the council is we're actually recognising social procurement opportunities associated with the northern and western growth zones. And if you have a look in your report on page 4, the council makes a very clear statement about this tonight, and it says the city is a GROW Compact signatory. And GROW is actually, in fact, what today Ballarat GROW was launched, but Geelong was the first community in Australia to actually have GROW. And essentially it is that businesses make a commitment to provide employment and local procurement to help address the most disadvantaged areas in our community, or those areas that have the most lack of opportunity. And in Geelong, those areas are Norlane, Corio and Whittington. And what the council is committed to do is to try to make sure that if the northern and western growth zones do grow strongly, that those communities can benefit from that development. And what the city is actually trying to do is the city will encourage with proponents throughout the preparation of each precinct structure plan to encourage the use of the social procurement and local investment in the subsequent urban development of the growth areas as part of GROW. And this is a major statement from this council to actually say to all those development community, we want you to be able to look at the GROW Compact, to actually sign up for the GROW Compact and actually give our existing community some significant benefit from what's being undertaken by the northern and western growth zones. Another area of significance in the report that gives me some comfort as well too is that 100 years ago, what we used to do is we would build our railway lines, and that was our public infrastructure in terms of how you actually got to a particular population centre. So you would build the railway line first, and then guess what would happen? All the towns would be built around the railway line. Well, 100 years since that, we don't do that anymore. We actually just build, and then we say we've got to put in a railway line or light rail, or we've got to do other public transport options to actually make that community a more livable community. So certainly as someone who's custodian of local government and planning and also how the community lives, I wish we did have that same philosophy as 100 years ago where we build public transport first before we put housing in. But we don't do that, and the prospect of doing that is very remote. However, I'm very encouraged by the framework that's actually released tonight, and it does talk about the importance of public transport, and it talks about the connectivity of the new growth zones with CBD Geelong and with the transport networks that we have to Melbourne. And as a consequence, a significant amount of work in this document does talk about the need for advocacy and infrastructure from the state government to ensure that this is a livable community and is actually part of the Geelong community and not isolated as we've seen in many urbanised growth areas throughout Victoria. And I congratulate the officers for the work they have done in that area. And a very interesting aspect of the report is called the Clever and Creative Corridor. And this essentially is providing a zoning area, an opportunity for connectivity amongst the whole growth zone so that the community can better move between that particular locality. And this is a unique aspect of the zones that have been presented tonight to the public. Another area that I wish to draw attention to, and that is our existing residents that live within the growth zones that we are proposing tonight. When you look through the community consultation that we had come back to us and the engagement that Council had, a significant concern which was raised was that a significant number of the community that currently live in rural zoned living areas said they didn't want to change what they were doing. They had made a commitment to live in a rural lifestyle. And I'm pleased to say that the officers have actually modified the report since it was first released to try to address the concerns of that community. And the way they have done it should be congratulated. They have actually come up with a proposal to actually create the growth zone as the last area in the zones that have been created. So what will happen is that development will occur in more greenfield sites, and the rural residential zoned areas will be left as the last areas to be developed. And because this is a 20 to 30 year project that we are talking about, it gives one generation the opportunity to continue to live the rural residential zone living that they have now. And importantly, it also means that council cannot rezone in the interim and actually cause rate stress that we have seen in a number of the communities around Victoria and also in our Geelong area associated with Armstrong Creek, where Farmers and other people who have chosen not to be part of growth zones have actually been impacted by significant rate increases. And the proposal to actually do this in a managed and staged basis can give some comfort to that community that the officers and the council have listened to their concerns that have been brought before us. And finally, other councils will talk about the environmental aspect, the housing density and the significant other work that has been undertaken with this project. But I just wish to congratulate, I won't name officers personally, but I want the community to understand this is probably the most significant amount of work that council has actually undertaken in the last 2 years. And our officers, both past and present, do need to deserve the praise of the councillors for the work that they have done. And this document is of significance nationally in terms of a planning framework, and I hope it is used by others as a benchmark of how you can actually try to create livable communities in the future. And it should be noted that a number of state and other statutory organisations have participated in this process as well too. The state government through the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, Regional Development Victoria, Transport Victoria, Victorian Planning Authority, Vic Roads and Barwon Water have been strong stakeholders with this particular document that's been put forward tonight. So I'm actually very proud of what's been presented to the council. I'm proud of the manner in which the officers have responded to the community that currently lives in this area, and I'm very proud to say that the growth of Geelong is returning back to the northern part, which is in my heart and in my blood. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Aiken. Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Aitken's made a very eloquent explanation of these papers and this motion, and I'll try to add a few pieces. First of all, of course, it's true that these growth areas will take the load off the Bellarine, and to those people from St Leonard's, please note that. Certainly, I too would like to applaud the work done by the officers who've put really excellent work into this. There has been considerable community engagement, and those submissions, the 81 submissions that have been made, have been listened to, and various amendments were made during the process. And not going over what Councillor Aitken said, there's also identifying the rural living properties with the growth areas will be subject to future investigation and residential development in the long term. There has been a commitment to undertake an overarching biodiversity conservation strategy for each growth area, and an outline of a comprehensive, active public transport network, which was touched upon by Councillor Aitken. This framework plan outlines principles and actions to achieve the community's clever and creative vision. This will mean the creative of a network of sustainable, self-sufficient, livable, walkable neighbourhoods, and will centre on the clever and creative corridor that was mentioned before, a tree-lined boulevard corridor of community activity and high-quality active and public transport options linking neighbourhoods in both growth areas. The growth areas will be planned and developed in an orderly and sustainable sequence of 9 short, medium and long-term precincts, and beginning with a commencement of 2 PSPs, 1 in each area. And this has been designed so that, depending on the growth rate and the influx of people, the further PSPs can be released in a timely manner. Many elements have been built upon past knowledge. There have been lessons learned, and this framework plan is understood and we believe will stand the test of time. There's a number of fundamental elements involved in adaptability and passive and active integrated transport. The PSPs will be city-led. And having touched upon the environment, there will be a biodiversity and conservation strategy. We think about the lake, and indeed the river and creek corridor will have master plans, and there'll be a transition over a period into this lake that was mentioned before. Aboriginal and post-contact heritage issues will be protected, and land use buffers will be undertaken to existing industrial areas. Each neighbourhood will have a 20-minute walkability, and they're planned to be carbon neutral neighbourhoods. Where activity centres and employment precincts are considered, there will be 2 sub-regional and 8 neighbourhood activity centres where there's different levels of supermarkets, shops, schools and other facilities. And indeed, the movement and transport will include the opening of the Geelong-Ballarat railway corridor between Geelong and Bannockburn, and a new railway station will be built near Evans Road, Lovely Banks. And there will be upgrades and duplications of the Ballarat, Midland and Hamilton highways, high-frequency bus services and much more. So I really, once again, would like to applaud the work done by our officers, and I commend the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Councillor Grisbeck.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I can see why so many people want to live and work and play in the city of Greater Geelong, and why wouldn't you? With investment in our region, Greater Geelong is the place to be. As Councillor Mason has said, the first PSP is planned for the northern growth area will be the Elko Road precinct. This area is about 485 hectares and anticipated just over 4,000 dwellings. I'm really pleased that the community has been consulted during this process and has been engaged, listened to, and the plans have changed as a result of that engagement. I want to thank the community for sharing their views with the council and meeting with Anthony and I on many occasions. This is why we become councillors, is to listen to our community. We have learned some lessons from the Armstrong Creek development, and I think that council is very well placed to handle this growth and handle the PSPs in a sustainable way. This will not be the last time that you get to have your say. Each PSP will come through to the council and it will go out to the community for consultation. So this is not the end of the engagement in terms of those growth areas. There will be ongoing engagement over the course of the next 20 to 25 years. So with that, I'd just like to say thank you to the officers. I'm going to name a few and I hope I don't miss it. So Gareth leads that team, Nat and Jess as well. So thank you very much. And I think the document is very comprehensive, and if you don't have a copy, it would be good for you to download it from the internet or ask the city for a copy, because I think it's very well written and in plain English. So thank you, Nat, for that.
Thank you, Grisbeck. Councillor Contell.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, I think Councillor Aitken did a good job of trying to explain just the quantum size of this growth zone. And if you have a look at the most recent one that we're familiar with, being Armstrong Creek, being some 60,000 odd people, this one here is near on double that. Equally, I won't go into all of the advantages and benefits and disadvantages, because I think the councillors prior to me have done that. But I equally had some concern with the amount of feedback that we were receiving early on from residents. So whilst I could see the potential and excitement and the benefits that it could bring to the community, there was equally some concern and unrest and a lot of unknowns by the community. Since we've been able to release this, I did a quick reach out and call around to those that particularly made effort to contact me in those early days. And I guess there's still a lot to be taken in with this report. It is a significant document, as Councillor Grisbeck has already indicated, and I'm sure that people, as they read it and familiarise themselves with it, will identify areas of perhaps question. But that said, with the people that I've discussed this with in recent days, they're a lot calmer and a lot more comfortable with the process and the timelines around this development. And I think testament to that is probably tonight, because when this was presented to council and the community, and I'm sure the northern councils will know the exact date, but it was at the trotting track, there was the majority of that night, because it was a community focus meeting, was questions about this area, and there was a lot of concern in the room. Now, at least with the people that have turned up here today, there was not one question asked on this matter. That's not to say that there aren't questions, but it's certainly a lot different to what we saw in that first meeting. There's no doubt that there's great potential, and it'll be for future generations and future councils to make sure that we take advantage of that. But some of the success will be ensuring that we have great partnerships with the community and the developers. And what we don't want to see is poor standard of developments that can still be seen in our community, particularly from the era of the 80s, where you've got communities in suburbs with no footpaths. They're unable to push their prams, their children safely within the street. Playgrounds are sparse, and we're playing catch-up there as a council. I think if we can work well with those partnerships, we can ensure that we have proper amenities and facilities in this growth zone that will really be an engaged community. And strategically, I think this area really can be looked upon in the future to service some of the needs that we're already seeing today, particularly if you look at some of the growing sporting needs that we have, even with soccer. You look at the facilities that Ballarat have and Werribee have, yet they're half the size of us, in some cases more, and we've still got work to do. And I think if we form those partnerships with the developers in the future, there's real opportunity for excitement. You look at the quarry that Councillor Aitken mentioned. I'm sure that a visionary could look at that with a potential Olympic standard rowing course. Now, these are all things obviously that are pipe dreams at the moment, but they have potential. So the councillors prior to me are right. This is a significant decision, and I think the message that needs to be left with you, if you haven't heard already from Councillor Grisbeck, that it's not the last time that community will have an opportunity to have a say, because once we've sought permission from the Minister to exhibit, there will be further opportunities for input. So I'll leave it at that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Contell. Councillor Manane.
Most of it's been said, so I'll only just make a couple of quick comments. Clearly this is a pretty significant piece of planning for our city, and as said, the major piece of work since Armstrong Creek. And adding this amount of additional people to our population of over 100,000, as has already been mentioned, is a major decision for our council and for our community. And also, as has already been said, the quality of the work produced and presented is very good. It appears that we are really determined to build some livable communities, as distinct from just building vast housing estates that end up with both economic and social issues. I do note, and as also has been mentioned, about the fact that there are two precinct structure plans that are going to be commenced immediately, one in the north and one in the east, one in the west. And it's on this that I want to make a specific comment. It is absolutely essential that we coordinate the development work that we are responsible for with the creation and the completion of these major road and rail infrastructure work that will obviously be the domain of state government. So we've got a lot of work to do ourselves in our own area, but we really must advocate and push strongly to make sure that there is a marrying up of both pieces of work. I had the opportunity this evening to drive in from Armstrong Creek, and we all knew, of course, that Bowen Hedge Road was going to be duplicated, and the work is being done, but we're playing a little bit of catch up, and I'd really love to see us get this bit right in terms of the major infrastructure that's going to service these two growth areas, and the fact that a couple of precinct structure plans are going to be started already. Clearly, the work that we need to do in this area of getting this additional major rail and road service infrastructure should be happening already. I recently went to a presentation where there was some research presented that was overwhelming, that showed that the success of these outer urban developments, the success of the developments and the success of the individuals who live in the developments, both financially and socially, is absolutely critical that they have access to employment opportunities. And so that is how critical this major work is, because if we want the people living in these new communities, they need obviously access to both Melbourne and Geelong employment opportunities so that they can be successful and enjoy a life within our community. It is therefore becomes very obviously and increasingly important that this city needs to continue to develop its own transport strategy for the future when we consider the potential additional pressure that this increased population can have on the livability of our own city. And therefore we need to drive the change around cars, around alternative transport, and drive the need for additional public transport. So it is a wonderful story. As I say, it's a great time for us to be living in Geelong and to see the growth of Geelong. There's also a responsibility for us to make sure we do it in an orderly manner, of which I'm sure we can. So again, my congratulations to the staff who've already been mentioned. I hope they get rewarded for the time and effort they've put into this good work.
Thank you, Councillor Monet. Councillor Mansfield.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I also support the comments that have been made by my fellow councillors on this very important matter. Anyone who's had a chance to read through this document, I think will read it and think, oh, I'd love to live in a place like that. The principles underpinning these developments are really solid. They emphasise things like affordable housing, protection of our biodiversity. There are some excellent aspirations in them. I suppose I'm a little bit nervous in that I really hope that these don't get lost in translation when it comes to what actually gets built, and that's going to be the important task for the rest of the term of our council and the work that takes place in this and future councils to ensure that those really solid principles in this framework aren't lost. For example, the biodiversity threat from population growth is tremendous in our, not just in our municipality, across the state and across the country. It's previously been conservatively estimated that only 5% of pre-European biodiversity is still existing in the municipality, and that's continuing to be placed under threat by ongoing population growth. The numbers we're talking about in these developments are huge, the number of additional people that will be moving into the area. So it's great that we have an overarching strategy that puts biodiversity right up there at the start of this project. We're looking at things like sustainability. We're talking about building active transport into these locations. I really hope that is fulfilled when they're built. The other thing that's going to be a real challenge for councils going forward is ensuring that we continue to service all of the existing municipality and their needs and what's happening in those spaces, as well as these new developments. I think there's actually a huge challenge ahead of us, both in terms of just managing the planning, but also funding a lot of the infrastructure that will be needed out there. So we will definitely be needing to work with our state and federal counterparts and most likely also with the private sector to make sure that we can deliver what we've set out to achieve in these frameworks. Excellent work here, and as I said, I really hope that we see this framework result in some very livable and sustainable communities.
Thank you, Councillor Mansfield. Any other comments, rather? Councillor Nelson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I won't talk too long because most councillors have said pretty much everything with regard to this new growth area, other than I remember back in 2013, a couple of my fellow councillors were here and this first came to our attention, and just wanted to acknowledge a couple of people in the gallery. Bill and Tom, thank you for your support and patience. 6 years this has taken, and we're just getting started now, so I understand we need to get it right. Councillor Aitkins obviously said a lot about this, so I won't talk too much longer. But we'll be working with the state government and the VPA to get it right, and I just can't wait for this. What was once a quarry, and I stood at the bottom of the quarry myself, as most councillors around the table have, and to have a 2.3 kilometre wide lake will just be a fantastic thing for Geelong, and giddy up. I hope it happens soon.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. If there's no further comments or questions, I'll go back to Councillor Aiken to close.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Look, I encourage the comments that the council has made. It does reflect the community consultation that we had. We are tonight exhibiting this, so there is a further opportunity for the community to make some comments during that process as well too, before we even get to the more detailed development stage, which is these PSPs, which is the precinct structure plans. But I think the challenge really should be put out to the development community, and that is that Geelong has adopted the clever and creative planning framework, and that essentially is to try to think differently. And I hope the developers actually do respect that this land that we're making available tonight actually is quite unique. The northern area is actually a hilled area and actually will overlook the Yuyangs and the great grass plains of the north and the residential areas of the northern Geelong. And that's not a traditional urbanised area when you have a hill and sloped area topography. What we see in Wyndham and the growth of Melbourne is flat, consistently unappealing urban growth area. Well, this northern zone actually is going to be a hilled area, essentially, and being east of Bacchus Marsh Road. And the jewel in the crown of these two is certainly it's been touched on, is that the western growth zone is another unique piece of land where there is going to be the birth of this incredible lake as its centrepiece. And I hope that developers do respect this land that's being made available in a planning sense to them and come up with some very clever and creative ways and manners to ensure that this is a very livable part of Australia and reflects the council's aspirations and the community's aspirations to be a clever and creative community.
Thank you, Councillor Aiken. Put the recommendation to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? That is carried. Thank you. Item 2 is the Rippleside Park, the inclusive play-space development. Moved Councillor Murray and seconded Councillor Contell. Thank you, Councillor Murray.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. This report recommends the... I might just wait for everyone to do a handful. This is a very important item. This is item number 2.
Nice try. And I think the McCanns have left, that's why, so half the gallery's gone.
You missed it.
I think it's right the swing.
I think we killed him on the first one.
No swing for them.
Lucky you didn't get a flood prone, really.
Yes, thank you. I'll start again. This report recommends the City of Greater Geelong enter into a memorandum of understanding with charities touched by Olivia and Variety to partner in the delivery of an inclusive play space at Rippleside Park. And just by way of background, in 2018, last year, the City received a proposal from a community member to consider developing an inclusive play space within the municipality. Discussions have been held regarding the proposal with the charity organisations Touched by Olivia and Variety, the children's charity. Play is important for everyone, young and old, families and carers, and people of all abilities. The importance of play is recognised by the United Nations Convention on the Right of the Child. The United Nations recognises play as a right for all children. Play is essential to children's development. So the proposal tonight is to enter into project management collaboratively managed by the City and with an input from charity organisations for the fundraising, design, consultation and promotion. The completed play space will be a public asset owned and managed by the City. It's important that the City has an active involvement in the design and construction of the asset. However, the approach will increase the chance of success by spreading responsibilities, increasing the diversity of ideas and increasing the buy-in by the user groups and surrounding community. It also increases the funding opportunities and scope to apply for grants available to not-for-profit groups. Just by way of explanation for Touched by Olivia, in November 2006, John and Justine Perkins tragically lost 8-month-old daughter Olivia to a rare illness. Her death inspired the creation of Touched by Olivia charity, and its purpose was to aid children, focusing on those with disabilities and play spaces for kids. Over the last decade, Touched by Olivia has developed a unique model working with communities, councils and developers to build more than 30 Livy's places, inclusive play spaces across Australia. The partnership between Variety and Touched by Olivia is a perfect fit, with children and their families at the very heart of all we do. It's heartwarming to meet another charity with a shared passion, as Touched by Olivia are saying, to deliver inclusion through play to Australian communities. This partnership is a wonderful example of organisations coming together for the greater good, and Touched by Olivia say they're excited about how much more that can be achieved in this space. Just by way of further explanation in relation to the present playground that's there, this was built from funds from the City, state government and 124 local sponsors, and each piece of playground equipment was sponsored by local organisations, and 1,200 fence pickets were individually purchased and are still on site and display the names of the purchaser. And the 1,500 volunteers contributed to the playground's planning, fundraising and construction. It took 3 years to plan and 6 days to construct in November 2000, and I'm reliably told that Councillor Aitken still have blisters on his hands from swinging that hammer back in the year 2000.
Digging a hole, the triple side's really tough ground.
So, Mr Mayor, the preliminary cost of the construction of this is estimated at $1 million, plus an additional $500,000 to upgrade the surrounds and the toilet facilities, with work anticipated to start in the 2020-21 financial year. The potential financial benefits from the proposed partnership would include access to a network of suppliers who offer discounts on equipment, design and service, and leveraging the charity organisation's ability to secure grants, raise funds and secure pro bono goods and services. The Friends of Rippleside Park is an active community group, and they will be engaged as key stakeholder as part of the project. So that's all I've got to say, Mr Mayor, on this.
Thank you. Councillor Murray. Councillor Contell.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. For those that have left, they won't be able to contain themselves tomorrow. They'll be kicking themselves when this is all over the front page of the Addy, and you think they were missed it by a few minutes, Councillor Murray here. But whilst you've gone into some great detail, there is more. As has been said, this park already has a really strong link to the community, and we are all familiar with it. There wouldn't be many people within Geelong that haven't visited Rippleside Park, whether it's the playground or the park itself. They're beautifully placed or positioned on the waterfront. Great walking tracks, barbecues, just great family area. And the fact that it's so engaged in history with the community, being built and developed in the year 2000, as you said, with a young, long-haired Councillor Aitken of the Corio Shire at the time, it's coincidental that the idea for this inclusive play space, this all abilities playground, has come from the community approaching council once again and asking whether we could look at areas that could house and locate a park such as this. And we have a playground strategy, and Rippleside Park, as beautiful as it is now somewhat dated and aged, and it is identified for upgrade. So it fits perfectly with what's being proposed. We also understand that in our municipality currently there's limited play opportunities for people with disabilities, particularly for a park like is being proposed here. And so it's a great opportunity to give back to the community. And too often, way too often in fact, when we are building infrastructure, not necessarily just we, but in general when infrastructure is being built, those of us that are those that are less fortunate than us and those with disabilities get overlooked in that development. But that will not be the case on this occasion, because the intent is to put them right at the front of everything that we're doing with this playground, and to make sure that it is inclusive for the whole of community. The beauty of the partnership, and Councillor Murray here has already spoken about the individual organisations, is that, one, they have form in building and not necessarily building, but helping fund these types of parks. And what they will be able to do, and their key responsibilities, will be to promote and increase the knowledge and engage the community to fundraise for this project. And there is a real intent to raise significant funds for the project. Councillor Murray has also said that we won't dilly-dally on this. If we can get the planning and design work and the funding right, the project should be able to start in 2020, 2021. The other thing that we've learnt over many years, and okay, we don't always get it right, but I think you heard about it again tonight, was consultation, community consultation, and how important it is to have the communication around changes within our region communicated widely and allow people to have the opportunity to provide input. If we adopt this report tonight, the intent, as it's indicated in the report, is that there will be a community engagement, extensive community engagement, and that there will be an engagement plan put in place so that residents, interest groups, all stakeholders have the opportunity to voice their opinions, suggestions and concerns and otherwise, and that we will take those on board to ensure that, once again, we deliver a project that the entire community is proud of when it is presented to the community, and that once again provides infrastructure and facilities for decades to come that all of community will be able to use. So with that, I put it to my fellow councillors to make further comments and to consider the report.
Thank you, Councillor Contell. Councillor Grisbeck.
Thank you. I just quickly wanted to acknowledge Tom in the audience. Tom emailed me and spoke to me last October. We were looking at a space in Lara to do an all abilities playground, and I'm glad to say that Tom recommended to me around the Touch by Olivia Foundation and drew that attention for me to understand what that might look like, and I'm really glad that we've taken it to the next level on a regional basis and actually made a larger park so that the whole of the municipality can use that particular space. So thank you, Tom, for raising that with me.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Aiken, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, a number of things have been touched on that are important, and not just simply the fact that I got blisters from digging holes in Rippleside Park, but and my wife even said to me on the weekend, because we went down to Rippleside Park, take the dog, and we went there after the correct time. I think you had to be there after 5 o'clock to take your dog down on a lead, so I did all the right things. My wife told me I'm not allowed to take the picket back. She said the picket can be recycled. It's not to come back home as a memento of something of the past. But look, what's really encouraging about this is that the project before was a great community initiative to build a playground, and it seems to be we found a similar platform to actually do that again in 2019. And what's really encouraging about it is that the playground or play space is actually reflecting our responsibilities in 2019 compared to what they were in the 1990s. In the 1990s, we didn't even talk about all abilities and inclusiveness in terms of what we did in the community. Today, it's actually part of our responsibility and our make-up as a council in everything that we do. So not only is this going to be a community-driven initiative, it's actually going to focus on all abilities and give a capacity for members of the community that have been excluded in the past to participate in infrastructure that we have. And I should share with the councillors as well too that the Access and Inclusion Committee is actually very excited about this project as well too, because this is going to be seen as a regional showcase about inclusiveness, and they're really looking forward to the opportunity with working with the community and council to reach this aim. And I think the broader community should also understand as well too that even though this is going to be a regional showcase, the council actually is doing a lot of policy work and investigation to ensure that all of our playgrounds have that some aspect of inclusiveness and all abilities access to them. So not only will this project actually show the council's intent and commitment to make Geelong an inclusive community, the work that we're doing behind the scenes in terms of all of our play spaces and playgrounds for the future are trying to embrace the principles of inclusiveness, and I'm really encouraged by some of the work that I've seen coming forward in the last 6 months by our officers in that regard, and I look forward to how that can be implemented in terms of infrastructure. I mean, nationally, Australia is now seen as the disability capital of Australia, and council does then have a responsibility to actually match that in terms of our national recognition as well too. Geelong as a community should be known as the most inclusive community in Australia, and a way that we can do that is to ensure that every program that we have is all abilities.
Thank you, Councillor Aiken. Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks to Councillor Aiken for taking some of my notes. You must have seen me writing busily. Just so proud as a councillor that we're part of developing these kinds of spaces in our municipality. Most people don't know that we actually have day jobs. Most of us have day jobs. I actually got told off the other day for not having a secretary to answer my phone because I have a day job. And my day job is I work with people and families with disability. And every day I have those same questions about where our kids can go. And I've seen the playgrounds that charities like Touch by Olivia produce, and they are first class. And as Councillor Aiken said, I think we should have one in every ward. I think every ward should have at least one big playground like that, because they are just fantastic. I won't talk much more about our community, as Councillor Aiken's already done that, but I wanted to say that even my beloved Geelong Football Club is building a sensory room. It's not quite open just yet. It won't be open until around 6, I understand. But even them, the footy club are doing that, and I think that is a fantastic thing to do for people on the spectrum, the autism spectrum. So great for them, the footy club, to be doing that. It's just one other thing that we can do as a community to build these playgrounds and enjoy what most of us just take for granted. So I just commend the council.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. If there's no further comments, I just want to make a couple of quick comments myself, just having I guess a strong interest in this. Welcome, Tom, to tonight's meeting. I don't want to steal your thunder. I'm glad to hear that you also had similar thoughts, but there was some early discussion on the opportunity that was presented for this particular park. Council's been at the forefront in recent years about building playgrounds that do cater for all abilities. We see special equipment out there that does cater for kids with disabilities, etc. But this particular park that we're looking to build is a park you will go along to and walk into and not see any difference. It will be a normal playground. For all intent and purposes, that is what the community wants. It's what our all abilities community want. They want to walk into a park and it's normal. The children don't think they're being treated any different, or anybody's treating any different. But it'll be smartly engineered, it'll be done in a manner that is respectful and people will understand. It just has a little bit more engineering, but for all intent and purposes, it's a normal playground and it'll be built accordingly. I think that's a really important factor to consider with what we're doing here. And I spoke to some people earlier about it, and I know Todd's here for a different reason, but Todd Devine is with us this evening. Was one parent who understood exactly where we were coming from and was supportive immediately, as were a couple other people. So I know you're here for another reason, Todd, but you know where I'm coming from with this particular topic. So we'll all work together with the community and with a small group that we've already spoken to, and we'll get a very good result. And I have spoken with Christine Cousins, the MP for Geelong, and have got good initial support there. So we're hoping that will also be reflective in further funding support for this particular project. I guess it just goes to show, as a council and as a community, we've come a long way in not just recognising people with disability and all abilities as such, but we're actually doing something about it. So I think that's a bigger statement again. Councillor Peake to close. Councillor Murray.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor, and I really do thank you, all councillors who have spoken on this. It's anyone who's spent any time in Geelong would have spent some time at Ribbleside Park over the years, and it really is a great park. And we drove past there on Sunday, and it was packed. And in fact, I did leave there quite a few years ago with a daughter with a broken arm from that park, so I have mixed memories of it, but they're all good. Yes. So this is really a great opportunity for us as a council to show to the public what we're all about, and this is one example of that. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Mayor for his involvement in this. He's really given this a push along. I do acknowledge Tom and Todd. I thought you were here for this one, Todd, and not the previous one. But it's important to note that the partnership entitles the charity to the naming rights of the park, with the likely name of the new place to be Livy's Place. But indeed a great community project that we will, I'm sure, all be involved in, and I'd put it to the vote, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Put that recommendation to the vote. Those in favour, those against, that is carried. Thank you. Item 3 is the Grovedale Men's Shed program. Moved Councillor Nelson and seconded Councillor Manane. Thank you, Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This project started for me probably nearly 2 years ago now, when I first met some of the men in their shed, which was what was then the pool house at Armstrong Creek, where the pumps were. And it was quite a small space, and I said if I was elected that I would do everything I could to help them out, because that wasn't a place where a men's shed should be. Now, men's sheds, for those who don't know, are designed specifically to help men a little bit older than myself, just a little bit, deal with mental health and talk about issues amongst each other in a safe place. And that back of that pool house wasn't a safe place. I managed to convince my fellow councillors and council officers to get $50,000 in this year's budget to find a place for them to call home. They're currently out at Foundation 61, another great charity. Rob Litsky does an amazing job out there, but that's a story for another day. But they really needed a place that they could call home. Council officers went to a number of places. Apparently there was a lot, apparently. 15 potential sites. I saw 3, but they saw fit to have the Grovedale Men's Shed at at Armstrong Creek West, so it can be co-located with another building as part of what council does, is we like to co-locate, so the buildings are used a lot more than what they're currently being used. So I'll let other councillors have their say, and I'll come back in just a moment. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Manane.
Yeah, I'll just quickly like to second everything that Ron's just said. I actually had occasion today to actually see the Grovedale Men's Shed residents in operation out at Foundation 61, and they were working with the residents out there. Spent a lot of time drinking coffee, as Rob explained to me, but nevertheless, we're doing a very, very valuable contribution of helping to upskill people with the skills that a lot of these older members of our community have, both in woodwork and in steel and a whole lot of things. So had a chance firsthand to just see some of the great work that these people from the Grovedale Men's Shed do, as is the case with all men's sheds, and I've had a bit to do with over a whole variety of different projects that they take on. They seem to be able to do anything if you go to them with a role. So yeah, and it's fantastic that they had 15 sites to look at. It just shows how versatile our community is. But the one they've chosen, I think, will be excellent, and we wish them all the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? If not,
maybe just one quick one, Mr Mayor, just to acknowledge the great efforts by all that were involved in getting this to this point, particularly Councillor Nelson and the officers. When I was growing up, I could never quite understand why my dad spent so much time in the shed, not necessarily drinking coffee, but he certainly spent a lot of time in the shed. But now with 3 daughters, a wife and a female dog, I could certainly appreciate what a good shed can do for a man. But all jokes aside, in the era of my parents and our parents, people had gardens, people had sheds, and they communicated and engaged with the neighbours in those environments, and that helped with exactly what this is designed to do, which is to allow people to communicate, perhaps share some burden that they may have, ease the pain, and build camaraderie. And given that era has moved, and the backyard garden is not as prevalent, or in our case, the front yard garden as well. Nothing like having tomatoes in the front and the back. And the sheds are less and less because we're living in smaller blocks and apartments. These types of initiatives are extremely important. So well done to all of you that were involved in this.
Thanks, Councillor Contell. If there's nothing further, I'll go back to Councillor Nelson to close. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. All jokes aside, mental health takes more lives than the road toll in Victoria, yet the state governments of both persuasions don't seem to want to put as much funding into it, which is a real shame. So I think we as a council have an obligation to create these men's sheds because they are truly needed. Thanks.
Thank you. I put the recommendation to the vote. Those in favour, those against, that is carried. Thank you. Item 5 is the Geelong City deal, finalisation and signing. Councillor Sullivan moving, and seconded Councillor Murray. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A bit of background on the City deal. A memorandum of understanding to work together on City deals was signed by the Commonwealth and State governments in Geelong on the 17th of January 2018. As a first priority, the Commonwealth and State governments agreed to work with local governments to deliver the Geelong City deal. Negotiations between the signatories and the community have been ongoing to finalise the scope of the Geelong City deal. And recently, on Monday the 11th of March 2019, the Commonwealth and State governments announced that the Geelong City deal had been secured with supplementary contributions from both the Commonwealth and State governments. This report seeks Council approval to endorse and finalise the Geelong City deal based on the commitments the City is making to the projects. The Geelong City deal would see $355 million in joint funding invested into the revitalisation of the Geelong region and the Great Ocean Road visitor economy. The City of Greater Geelong would work with the federal and state governments to deliver infrastructure projects, which are set to create thousands of new jobs and attract more visitors to our region. The 10-year plan will see the construction of Geelong's very own Convention and Exhibition Centre, the continued revitalisation of Central Geelong and expansion of the Deakin University future economy precincts in Moore Ponds, and completion of Stage 1 of the Geelong Safe Harbour Precinct. The City's commitments, as outlined in this report, are either budgeted this financial year or, in most instances, have been identified through the Strategic Resource Plan that was adopted by Council as part of the 2018-19 budget process. The City will only contribute funding to projects that fall within the City of Greater Geelong's municipality. Set to budget approval, the Council's financial support will include $7.28 million towards the Jerringup Street drain, $3 million to the Geelong Convention and Exhibition Centre, $3 million to the Central Geelong Revitalisation Works, $3 million towards the Geelong Safe Harbour project, $900,000 into smart parking activities, and $250,000 into smart city initiatives, including safe cameras, pedestrian counting, and Renew Geelong. These projects have all been identified as priorities, as outlined in the Council Plan 2018-2022. Mr Mayor, this is an extraordinary amount of funding, and we are tremendously lucky to have a city deal. There is no shortage of other cities fighting for one, and I recommend the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Murray.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Sullivan. And I just make these comments a little bit tongue-in-cheek, and I think we should be, and we are excited by the announcement of the city deal. But certainly we have watched with anticipation of when and how much. This was first announced, as Councillor Sullivan said, in January 2018, and it'd be fair to say that press conference didn't end well, in a joint press conference between state and federal. And even just recently, the announcement of the city deal, there was one announcement on Sunday of the long weekend, and there was a further announcement the next day. So state on the Sunday, federal on the Monday, in relation to the city deal. So, as I said, it's been a long time in coming, and we as a council have kept watching this space to see what would happen and where it would finish. And I think there was a few surprises from what was initially thought may be in the city deal, but that's probably a discussion for another time. This is about tonight what the council is going to contribute in relation to those projects, and they're all great. And as a council, you know that nothing wrong with what we're contributing. So I think there was a fair bit of politically manoeuvring over the past, but we're getting closer to the pointy end.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Any others to make comment? Councillor Aiken.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Look, I'm going to support the recommendation before us, but I just want to make the following statements. I've been told that something is better than nothing. Well, the reality is in the northern suburbs we got nothing out of this. We had a project that actually could have been a partnership between local government, state government and federal government, which is called Northern Arc, and it would have fitted perfectly with the three tiers of government actually working together to renew a community, to give community pride in its area, and also restore some confidence that the three tiers of government are concerned about their community. And the city deal was the perfect opportunity for that to happen, and we got nothing out of the city deal for those of us that come from the northern part of Geelong. And then I just question why the community is cynical about political leaders. I mean, this project was actually announced as the most significant manner in which state and federal and local governments could actually work collaboratively to actually put forward some major infrastructure projects for its local community. And then 2 weeks later we get announced a $2 billion project. I mean, wouldn't that project actually be part of a city deal process and actually be announced together and actually have the three tiers of government working together in the best interests of the community? So from my perspective, I'm really disappointed that the North got nothing out of the city deal that was negotiated. In fact, there's more money being spent on the shipwreck coast, and I have to be careful what I say, there are no Freudian slips, but yeah, like the reality is most of the money is not even in Geelong, and it's called a city deal. And it is so disappointing that there was a political framework to actually try to go around Australia and actually establish infrastructure and establish relationships between local, state and federal government. And this city deal, and then 2 weeks later to have a $2 billion transport deal, which was outside of the city deal, just emphasises why the general community have lost respect and confidence in their political leaders. And I hope that those people that have been part of this process actually understand that they haven't actually done a good thing by the Geelong community. And certainly, from my perspective, from the northern suburbs, I'm happy to sign it because we get something in terms of the broader Geelong community. The north, we get nothing. And I still don't understand why 2 weeks later you announce the biggest infrastructure funding ever in Geelong's history, which isn't even part of the City Deal project. So I share the cynicism that my community now has about our political leaders.
Thank you. Councillor Nelson.
I've got an answer for Councillor Aitken. It's because there's a federal election. That's probably why. And in the north, the reason you don't get anything is because it's a safe Labor seat, state and federal. So they're not going to do anything because they don't have to. But all that aside, this is a great thing for Geelong. 5 years ago in 2014, when I was a councillor, it wasn't a good time to be in Geelong, certainly not politically. Alcoa was closing, Viva was, or Shell was threatening to close, Ford's closed, and Geelong wasn't a good place to be. I look out my window now and I see 5, count them 5 cranes in the sky. Geelong's going in leaps and bounds, and this is more cranes in the sky, so that's more jobs, as Andy knows very well. Jobs, 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 and it's great for Geelong, so I support it.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. If there's no further comments... Oh, sorry, Sarah. Councillor Mansfield. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And look, I suppose I share some of Councillor Aitken's frustrations about this, but I suppose one way of looking at this deal is that there are a number of key projects that have been on Council's top priority list for a while that will hopefully be able to be dealt with now, and I would really like to see us move the Northern Arc. I know it was lobbied for strongly as part of this process, but I think that really needs to now become one of our key priorities as a council in terms of future lobbying for funding. It's a really important project, partly because of the way it intersects with the development of the Barwon North facility, and the whole idea around that precinct is really to develop a centre that will facilitate improved health and wellbeing for a huge number of people out in the north, and so I would love to see that become one of our key priorities in terms of advocacy for capital projects in the future. So, looking on the bright side of this deal, we can hopefully get the convention centre done, a few of the other big projects off the list, and focus on some of those other really important projects in our municipality.
Thank you. Just before I go back to Councillor Contell.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I will. I agree that the projects here are really positive. I think that, as Councillor Mansfield has said, whilst there are other projects within the area that we need to be looking at, particularly from this point forward, there's some really positive things to come out of this. That said, I also agree with Councillor Aitken. The only way that we are going to be able to articulate to the politicians that they need to do more in the north is that it's going to have to come, unfortunately, from us. Because who in their right mind would run in the seat of Corio or Lara? You are to a battering of nothing. It will never happen. So we will never have a change of government in our lifetime, federal or state, in those electorates. Never. So it's going to be left to us, and I applaud Councillor Aitken for yelling it out tonight, and we're going to keep yelling it out because we're the only advocates that community has.
Yep.
It's never going to change in our lifetime politically. And the only way they're going to hear it is by us continuing to make noise and encouraging the paper to continue to put it on the front page, because we're not going to stand for it. It's not good enough that the North and Whittington they're not getting their fair share. It's not good enough. And we should say it unashamedly every opportunity we possibly get. Yes, we'll put our arms around the politicians. Yes, we'll applaud them and pat them on the back when they do a great job. But there's way too much still to be done. And sitting in any job for a decade without any opposition, you've got to get lazy. And that's what's happening. And so I applaud Councillor Aitken for what he said. We shouldn't take away from the great projects that are here. They're great. The Convention Centre is going to be excellent, but way more to be done in the North. And here's to starting that campaign tonight.
Councillor Grisbeck.
Just one comment. I'm hoping that of all the $355 million that is going to be spent in our region, that might do something for the unemployment rate in Corio and Norlane to be almost about 19, 20%. So I'm hoping that this could go some way to giving jobs to those in the North. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Manane.
I'll be very quick. I obviously, like other councillors, I will be voting for the deal. I'm looking at the deal. I can't see anything for youth unemployment. I can't see anything for food shortage. I can't see anything for homelessness. I can't see anything for family violence. I can't see anything for substance abuse. And if we're not going to be serious about tackling our social problems, we need to be advocates. And I agree totally that we should, if it's not going to happen at a state or federal level, then we need to get active and make it happen here.
Thank you, Councillor Manane. Before I go back to Councillor Sullivan to close, I just want to make a few quick comments myself. And in particular, the Northern Arc has been spoken about, written about ad nauseum, and we will continue to do so, because we are the only ones who are making the noise. We're the only ones who have stumped up $20 million and put it on the table front and centre. That is our commitment. That is 1/3 of the project. From a local council, it will be the biggest investment we make as a council, certainly in my time, and I think of all time, in all honesty. Obviously, we'll have a discussion about the civic accommodation, which is a separate body of work, but as far as infrastructure in our suburbs, the $20 million commitment from this council remains and will remain, I'm hoping, until one day the states and the federal government, or one or the other, step up and get this project completed, because until that day comes, they will be very tired of us continually going to them. Nice to see you, how about the Northern Arc? And then we'll have a discussion about whatever we came to talk to them about. But the Northern Arc will not be left until it's actually completed. And we've been told many times, give up, don't bother, you'll never get there. But we've seen in the past that is not what good councils do. It was mentioned before about, community leadership as such, or political leadership, whatever it is. I think this particular council is showing that as a group, as a collective group. We are showing community leadership, and I think that will persevere through this process. And it'd be great to see it happen during our term. I don't know that it will, but it would be great to see if Northern Arc did get the allocation of funding that it should get. So, and just a quick one in relation to the city deals. It was sort of on the back of the visitor economy. Well, if we get the Northern Arc up and built in conjunction with the Barwon Health facility there, visitors who come to the region and need to visit family and friends in that area will have a fantastic area to go to and enjoy, and have a reason to come down to this area to specifically go to the Northern Arc. So it actually ironically fits in with that visitor economy kind of narrative. So again, we won't give up on the fight to get the Northern Arc completed, and we'll give that commitment to the community. Councillor Sullivan to close.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just close simply by saying that I do agree and share with both the praises and the frustrations of the views put around this chamber this evening. And I'd like to publicly acknowledge the work of Councillor Bruce Harwood, or the hard effort he put in fighting to include as many projects in this deal, including the Northern Arc. Thank you.
I put the recommendation to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? That is carried. Thank you. Item 5, Audit and Risk Committee Summary Report. Councillor Grisbeck will move it. Oh, my apologies, to move into confidential. Councillor Grisbeck and seconded Councillor Manane. Those in favour, those against, that is moved into confidential. Thank you.
While we've been delivered some relief in terms of the resumption of recycling collections in the City of Greater Geelong, we shouldn't sit too comfortably in that relief. The system's still very vulnerable, and there's certainly a risk of the same thing happening again in the future without urgent and comprehensive reform. This is due to a range of market failures in the recycling industry and historical reliance on exporting our recyclable material and chronic underinvestment by all levels of government in the industry. The Municipal Association of Victoria, or MAV, has developed an action plan, quite a comprehensive action plan, outlining the steps that all levels of government need to take in order to strengthen the local recycling system. And this motion is calling on Council to endorse the MAV's action plan, as well as to commit to undertaking the steps in this required by local government, to lobby our state and federal MPs to do their bit in the action plan, and also to work with the industry and community to manage our waste more sustainably. So just to touch on some of the aspects of this action plan that are important for local government, what I'm asking councillors to support our commitment to this evening. One is to collaborate for market expansion, and that means working with the Victorian government, looking for opportunities to collaboratively procure curbside recycling services. We want more competition and more investment in recycling in Victoria. We want to educate the community about recycling, minimising contamination. Our Waste Department already undertakes a number of activities around this, but there's certainly more room for improvement. Contamination is a really significant issue in terms of allowing our material to be accepted and recycled. Buy recycled as a council, so look at where we can in our procurement of materials, incorporate recycled materials. Explore stream separation, and what that means is how can we better separate things that the high valued recycled materials from the existing recycling collection. And we really need to continue our advocacy work with the federal and state governments to achieve all of these reforms. By endorsing this notice of motion, what we will be doing is lobbying our state and federal counterparts to do their bit. So for the Victorian government, what we'd like to see them do is use some of the funds from the so-called Sustainability Fund, which is over $500 million that's been collected from councils, so that's ratepayers' money, that could be invested in a range of measures to strengthen recycling in Victoria, including investing in recycling infrastructure, funding and supporting market development, introducing a container deposit scheme. That's something we've heard strongly from the community here. That's something that they would like to see happen. Bolster community education and strengthen industry oversight and regulation. I think anyone who saw any of the ABC series War on Waste was probably fairly disheartened by the amount of the lack of transparency that is a feature of the existing recycling industry, and that a lot of what we put into our recycling bins in good faith thinking we're doing the right thing, this will be recycled, actually doesn't end up being recycled at all. And so we need much stricter regulations around this to ensure that there is transparency in the industry and the community can have faith in the recycling system. At the federal government level, there are a number of really significant measures that would make a big difference to building a sustainable recycling industry in Australia. One is to mandate product stewardship. So we want industry to take responsibility for the products that they manufacture. That includes taking responsibility for the waste associated with those products. Number two, tackle consumer packaging. All of us are familiar with walking to the supermarket and seeing bananas wrapped in plastic. Bananas come with a natural wrapping. Why do they need to be in plastic? We also for those products that do need some form of packaging, people want more sustainable forms of packaging, things that can be reused or recycled and that don't don't just end up in landfill. Number 3, strengthen the national waste policy, and we need to take some really concrete steps, set some aspirational, some strong but aspirational plans and implement steps that move us towards, in a genuine way, towards a circular economy. We've spoken about the circular economy before in this chamber. It's about maximising the lifespan of every product to make sure that we get every ounce of usefulness out of that product before it ends up as waste in landfill. Number 4, regulate or ban production and importation of hard-to-recycle materials. I don't know, I'm sure that there's many people who've looked at the bottom of a recycling or of a package and thought, oh, is this what number of plastic is this? Can this go into recycling? And quite a number of materials can't even be recycled. Same goes for Action 5, standardise the package labelling so it makes more sense to people. It's so confusing for consumers at the moment. I'll leave it for fellow councillors to comment on, because I know that this has been an issue that has come up for many of us that we've heard from the community about in light of recent events, and I'll have a little bit more to say later.
Thank you, Councillor Mansfield. Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Sarah, for this initiative. And certainly the MAV Recycling Action Plan is extremely important, and it actually, not only what we've been talking about tonight is a good idea, or there are good ideas in it, it's actually in accordance with internationally agreed principles. And they are mainstream thinking internationally. And I'm really sorry, I've saved some of my energy for this part, councillors, to say that government has been really quite lagging. We've been lagging and not leading in this area, and it's been going on for such a long time. So I'm really quite proud that this city has the capacity to be progressive and to set sustainable principles into our policy documents. We have these principles in our policy documents. One of the basic areas of principle is the One Planet principles, and there's 10 of those, and they're in our policy documents. And one of those principles aims at sending zero waste to landfill. And similarly, another one of those 10 Planet principles is sustainable materials, using sustainable and healthy products such as those with low embodied energy, sourced locally, made from renewable or waste resources. So those are the One Planet principles, and they're in our documents. Those One Planet principles are actually based on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, now recently extended to 2030. And in particular, goal number 12 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are responsible production and consumption. Please bear with me, I'm going to read out 2 or 3 of these goals that our governments have agreed to implement. Item 12.3, by 2030, halve per capita global food waste at the retail and consumer levels and reduce food losses along production and supply chain, including post-harvest losses. Item 12.4, by 1220, in a year's time, achieve the environmentally sound management of chemical and all wastes throughout their life cycle in accordance with the agreed international frameworks and significantly reduce their release to air, water and soil, landfill, to minimise their adverse impacts on human health and the environment. Item 12.5, to, by 2030, substantially reduce waste generation through prevention, reduction, recycling and reuse. Similarly, 12.6, encourage companies, especially large and transnational companies, to adopt sustainable practices and to integrate sustainability information into their reporting cycle. And so it goes on and on. And I'd just like to re-emphasise that really, as Councillor Mansfield mentioned, it's up to local government, of course, to advocate. But certainly through the MAV, we've got another medium through which this advocacy has to be taken to state and federal governments. And as far as the state's concerned, as Councillor Mansfield mentioned, there is $500 million of unspent landfill levy. That income sitting in the Sustainability Fund, and the Victorian Government has the means to both support councils in the short term and to drive meaningful change to the system for the longer term. So this is, we've been waiting for this for a long time, and I hope that we have ever increasingly strong and effective advocacy in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I won't say too much because both Councillors Mansfield and Mason have said exactly what I wanted to say, but I wanted to say it anyway, so I'm just going to say it. Whatever. Just in case they didn't get it out there in the whoever's left out there in the gallery. It's a pity our upper house state member's gone because I wanted to ask him a question. But for me, it's pretty simple. You need to compost your food because your garden loves it. It's pretty simple. We need, as a council, we need to educate the separation of our recyclables. We do that really poorly, and we need to work harder on that. And number three, the biggest thing, is the state government needs to give councils that $500 million that they're sitting on, $500 million of the EPA levy, and encourage, as Councillor Mansfield said, to fund and support market development. $500 million they're sitting on, they won't help us. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Aiken.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Look, I just want to take a different tack on it. I actually do support the motion very strongly, but a couple of weeks ago, one of my nephews said to me, Uncle Ali, why are you letting the council collect the rubbish and they're not, they're sending it to landfill, they're not actually got a plan for it? And I actually couldn't respond to him, and it made me actually think, ultimately what has happened is we've actually outsourced our responsibility in local government. We've actually privatised the recycling system, and what we have done is, 20 years ago we created a 3-bin system, and in fact we've just accepted that that's what we do, and we're just going to keep doing it. And what I started to think about was what is under our control, because there is so much that's outside of our control, and we do have a responsibility to advocate that, and we can work with the MAV. But what is under our control, and that is we've got to get the waste out of our council bins. And we've got to simplify that whole message. That's what we actually want to attempt to do. And there are so many initiatives that we could actually undertake as council to be able to do that. And one of the ways of doing that is actually reducing the amount of waste. We really need an intensive education program within our boundaries to the community to say, well, the bin's there, but we don't want you to fill it. We want you to put as least amount that you can into it. And another strategy is the container packaging levy. The reality is Victoria is going to be the only state in Australia that doesn't have a container packaging levy shortly, with New South Wales and Queensland introducing it. And what that means is that helps us at local government level if we have a container packaging levy, because it means every bottle and every container, plastic and glass bottle, will not be in our bin. At the moment it ends up in our bin. And if the container packaging levy is introduced, it reduces what goes into our bin as well too. And I think we do have a responsibility at council level to now not just say, oh, good at SKAM's fulfilling its outsourced council responsibilities. We do need to look at our bin system as a council. And look, we're doing some really good work about the garden organics and the mulch facility that's been established out at Anarchy. The reality is food scraps are about 30% of our bins, and we're not actually doing anything about that. We're just still collecting that and we're sending that to landfill. And like some councils are looking at individual worm farms and providing subsidies to their community, and Councillor Nelson touched on that. They're also looking at local community compost facilities, because you must remember, not everybody, certainly in our newer areas, like Armstrong Creek, they actually don't have backyards. They've been reduced to such a size that they don't have traditional capacity to be able to have gardens, but they have capacity to make waste. And we have to look at unique ways to be able to do that. And so, and it's the same as our bins. I mean, we should probably just have a cardboard bin, because we actually know that there is a market for that particular product. And then plastics and tin and steel could be put into a separate bin. And so I think I strongly support the advocacy work and leadership that needs to be done at our national and state level. But I really think it's time that this council at a local level needs to start showing some leadership in how we're actually trying to address this issue as well too. And I think the message that really has to be is about, what's under our control, get the waste out of our bins and review the 3-bin system to try and put in place some new innovative ways how we can actually do this as a community in Geelong, because that's actually what the community is actually asking us to do. And we should be sharing this responsibility about our bins, not actually just outsourcing it and privatising it, which is what we've done for the last 20 years.
Thank you, Councillor Aiken. Councillor Murray? Yep. Sorry.
Look, I find this a very difficult topic to get my head around, to be quite honest. This whole recycling rubbish subject, it does my head in. And it's difficult, I think, for the average person on the street to understand what's involved. And for those who, and I was just thinking while I was listening to my other councillors here who follow social media, every now and then something will pop up from overseas, and it'll be an example of what that city or what that country is doing with their recycling, with their rubbish. And it looks fantastic, and you think, well, why aren't we doing that here in Australia? And there are more intelligent and educated minds than me that are obviously looking at this subject. But to me, there doesn't seem to be anything new. What we've got now is what we had a few years ago. So I really commend Councillor Mansfield in bringing this to us. I think it's like what Councillor Contell said before. We have to lead the way. We have to be the advocates in relation to change and education in this area. And I'm sure things are being done and we can fall in line with every other council, but I think something like this, it's an opportunity to bang the drums and make a bit of noise and not so much fall in line with what other councils may be doing, but perhaps lead the way. And I'm interested to see what will come of the report back again from Councillor Mansfield, the single-use plastic that would come back before us at some stage, I imagine. We've certainly discussed that late last year. But to me, look, really, this is an important matter, and see where it takes us.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Just before I go back to Councillor Mansfield to close, I just want to make a couple of quick points. This council many years ago was actually one of the very early adapters of the 3-bin system. It came out of a European model, I think out of Germany originally, but so we adopted that system in the early 2000s, about 2002, 2003, we adopted the 3-bin system, which has served us very well. It did take a while for the community to come on board and understand the rationale behind it, but we got there. And I've been saying for a little while now, maybe it's time to introduce the 4th bin. A lot of European cities, they have up to like 10 to a dozen bins that the community will go and put their particular waste in the particular bin every single time they need to. They are well educated and well disciplined in making sure that their waste is treated to its maximum capacity. The 4th bin, to my mind, would be the paper and cardboard. Clean paper and cardboard is a product that we know is valuable and would be taken overseas in a heartbeat. But we choose to still contaminate it, predominantly with glass is our biggest contaminant in our waste. And it has a huge impact that we're not able to continue the relationship we have had with China, for example. So the answer is there. It's just whether we as a community are prepared to, again, take the time and effort to make sure our waste is sorted correctly. In relation to the organics, well, I know our council's working on FOGO, the Food Organic, Green Organic system, so we know that work is being done. maybe this conversation will help accelerate that. We understand the importance of recycling of the green waste, which has been touched on out at Anarchy, and what that means to our community with the windrowing that's occurring there. And I think, again, we're going into a system of the hard waste collection system, which starts very soon, in fact, a few days' time. And what that will mean, particularly to our landfill capacity, this will have a significant impact. So I say to those that have already booked in their collection for their hard waste, I just hope they've done a little bit of work prior, which is to use social media, use Gumtree, use these avenues out there to potentially get their particular product reused or recycled, and not just take the easy out and put it out the front for council to come along and pick up and inevitably potentially take it to landfill, because that is most likely where the hard waste collection rubbish will go. So we just need to be smart with what we're putting out and take the effort and the time, use social media. We know, it's the classic, one man's rubbish is another man's treasure, so now's the time to test it more than ever. So we'll just see how we go with that, but I just think we have opportunity there. Yes, if we lead in this space and we do go to the government with rational plans about what we'd like to do, we'd like to see support financially to come back and put those plans into implementation. If they don't work, so be it, but at least we'll be having a crack at trying to be better with our waste. Councillor Mansfield to close. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you to my fellow councillors for your comments. I really support everything that's been said, in particular the comments relating to the importance of reducing our waste in the first place. A full recycling bin is better than a full red bin, but it's better yet to have all your bins empty. And that's what we should be working towards. And look, I know that there are many people in the Geelong community who are achieving that regularly, but it takes a lot of work at the moment because of the way our systems, our regulation around things like packaging, all of that sort of thing makes it really hard for a lot of people to be as sustainable as maybe they'd like to be. And that's where it's important that government does step in and assist to create an environment that is easier for people to live sustainably and reduce their waste. A couple of comments Mayor Harwood has already touched upon this, but I am assured that we are looking into developing a large-scale food organics processing facility. There are a whole range of technical issues around that, but the hope is to expand the green organics facility to allow large-scale food organics processing, which would be a real game changer because such a huge amount of what goes into landfill is food waste. In the interim, there are smaller scale options being looked at, including things like worm farms, solid digesters, small scale composting. So we do need to keep an eye on this space, but it is something that our Environment Department are looking at actively because it is such a huge component of what goes into landfill, and agree that we really need to start thinking differently about this whole process, and that's what this motion is asking for. Really, is to look at this issue as a whole country and find a way to work together, all levels of government, the private sector, and the community to ensure that we have recycling as an option, as one part of our waste management strategy, with the ultimate goal being to reduce the amount of waste we're making in the first place. But I am heartened by many of the comments made by my fellow councillors, and I am hoping to gain your support for this motion this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Mansfield. I put the recommendations of that notice of motion. Those in favour? Those against? Thank you kindly. Our second notice of motion is in relation to 300 to 400 Broderick Road, Lara, and it's moved by Councillor Aiken, and it's seconded by Councillor Wisbeck. Thank you, Councillor Aiken.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Look, the purpose of this notice of motion is to clear up any ambiguity of Council's position on this particular issue. The Council does want Broderick Road waste stockpile site cleaned up, and does support the community that wants the site cleared up as soon as possible. Council also wants past and future individuals and past and future companies made accountable for this mess. Council does need the full cooperation of the state government and in particular the EPA to protect the public health and safety. Council also wants the planning permits which contribute to this mess cancelled, and there are a massive legal process that we have to possibly go through and may not even be successful with that, but at least our intent is for the community to understand that we do want the planning permits that contribute to this mess cancelled. Council also needs the state government and the MAV to understand the statewide implications of the Broderick Road waste stockpile fiasco, and the planning regulations may need to be changed to avoid repeated performances of this. Sadly, we've got a mini Broderick Road in Stacey's Road out within a crow's flight area of Broderick Road, and it caught on fire on Sunday night. And I think this is a good example to show to the state government and the broader local government industry that these waste stockpiles are a health and safety issue for the community, and council does need to have some greater regulatory ability to be able to influence these. But what the motion as put before us tries to address those issues that I've just presented before us tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Grisbeck.
I reserve my right, Mr Deputy Mayor.
Any other councillor wish to comment?
Oh, okay.
That's the case. Back to you. Councillor Grisbeck.
Thank you. Look, just quickly, my community have been really concerned about this site for many years, and I'd like to just acknowledge some of the members who stayed around for the evening. Thank you. This site has been the subject of many conversations that I've had in the community, from the school principals to the fire chiefs to the local business owners, residents. We're now, in my view, dire straits with this landowner going into liquidation, and we need some help. I'd like to acknowledge that the city has worked really hard, and the CEO, thank you Mr CEO, for working really closely with both EPA, CFA, WorkSafe and EMV, which is Emergency Management Victoria, to ensure that the community are safe in this time of unknown, really. They've put mitigations for fire prevention in place. We've got 24/7 security on site. The community have told me they want this site cleared, and that's what we're asking for. We granted the very first permit as a temporary permit, and we have objected to every single application that has been made for it to be permanent since. VCAT, in my view, my personal opinion, is there's a lot to answer for in this particular issue. I feel the city has not been heard by VCAT at any stage of this process, and we're now left with this mess to clean up. Once the site's been cleared, we'll be asking the city to revoke the permit. Let's not kid ourselves. This is going to take a long time to clear it up. It's going to be years and years to actually mitigate this site. And we'll need to do it methodically. We'll need to make sure that we don't even know what half of the things are in the piles that are on that site. So this motion is to seek assistance from MAV, as Councillor Aiken has said, to highlight the implications of the state and federal government, as the state and local governments, for them to recognise that this site needs to receive the highest priority in terms of clean-up. We've heard our community, and now we're acting for our community. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Grisbeck. Councillor Aiken to close.
Look, I've got nothing further to really say about that, but just that the community does need to understand that council is fulfilling its same responsibilities with the Stacey Road site as well too, in that we were in an enforcement process in terms of Broderick Road, and sadly with the Stacey's road site location as well too, we've got a track record of enforcement on them over the last 2 years, and we're continuing that process in terms of all the levers that we have as a council. But clearly this issue of waste stockpiling and recycling of commercial quantities of waste is something that we need to look at a statewide level, because we're not addressing the issue, we're just shifting it to another site location. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Aitken. Put the recommendation of the notice of motion to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? That is carried. Thank you. Section D is the Assembly of Council. Have a mover and a seconder, please. Move Councillor Sullivan, seconded Councillor Contell. Those in favour, those against, they are carried. And Section E is the planning delegations. Move Councillor Sullivan, seconded Councillor Mason. Thank you. Those in favour, those against, they are carried. Thank you. Before we go into confidential, I believe Councillor Grisbeck would like to make a comment.
Just a quick veil to a community member that passed away in the last couple of weeks. I wanted to just acknowledge Fred Grove. He was a 46-year veteran of Victoria Police. He spent more than 50 years as a CFA volunteer. He was a friend. And look, I'd just like to acknowledge that his community work has been well documented. The Lara Fire Brigade just named one of its tankers. I don't know why I'm getting so emotional. Named one of their tankers the Captain Fred Grove. So I'd like to just bail Fred Grove.
And can I just add, Kylie and I had the pleasure of working with Fred most recently with the 50th commemoration of the Lara fires, and Fred was very actively engaged in that actual service and activity, and it was another fine example of what Fred's actually been able to do in the community. With that, the minister came down from Police and Emergency Services, and Fred was one of the leaders in developing that whole event and activity. Yeah.
Thank you. Look, I just very quickly, I remember Freddie, who was out at Werribee Way for many, many years, and he was a very highly respected policeman and did a lot of work outside the police force, obviously, as is well documented. So, yeah, we sent...
Very good police legacy. He was
the
the CIO.